translator? Dark angel? Interesting. Ling Han's gaze deepened as he nodded slowly. There existed a limit to the sword chi a cultivator could produce, no more than 30 flashes of sword chi at most. The strength of the body was also constrained, and the number of strikes that could be unleashed by a flick of the wrist within a split second had its bounds. But after the fusion of sword and body, Yuan Chenghe's form moved like a tempest, significantly amplifying the power of his swordsmanship. Where once the strain rested solely on his wrist, now his entire body was seamlessly integrated into the strike, greatly relieving his wrist's burden and allowing him to release sword strikes with astonishing speed. Tens of thousands of sword shadows converged upon Ling Han, accompanied by the sword chi. The pressure was unbearable. Enough games! With a whoosh, Hu Niu turned into a streak of lightning, her speed unmatchable. Even the swift sword couldn't hope to catch her. Yuan Cheng, he found himself helpless. His sword style, powerful as it was, could not land a single hit on the elusive Hu Niu. Faced with such an agile opponent, he became utterly dispirited, his mind scrambling for a place to strike. His gaze flickered over to Ling Han, and he muttered under his breath, "This one wouldn't also be as fast, would he? Come, fight me!" Yuan Cheng, he rushed forward toward Ling Han, for it was he who carried the peculiar stones. "Niu's back again." Hu Niu's voice rang out, and true to her word, she charged forward, her clenched fist crackling with electric energy, directed straight at Yuan Chenghe's back. With no choice but to defend, Yuan Chenghe was forced to abandon his pursuit of Ling Han. Every time he unleashed his most formidable technique, Hu Niu would dash away in a flash. Then, without hesitation, she would return, a constant nuisance that made Yuan Cheng, he lose his composure entirely. "Little girl, you better stay and face me." Yuan Chenghe's fury boiled over, challenging Hu Niu with gritted teeth. "Ha! I'll stop running. You think Niu is afraid of you?" Hu Niu retorted, hands on her hips, standing resolute. "Ugly people always talk big. See how Niu finishes you off." Yuan Chenghe seized the opportunity, leaping over his sword to strike, charging at Hu Niu. But just as he came close, Hu Niu jeered and, like a playful breeze, dashed off once more. His blade sliced the air, missing once again. His face twisted in rage, and he barked, "Going back on your word." Before he could finish, he froze. How old was she to be outwitting him so? "Ha ha ha! You're so foolish, ugly guy! Niu's only teasing you." Hu Niu's laughter echoed through the air, and she puffed out her chest, stating boldly, "Now, Niu will get serious and beat you to submission." Yuan Cheng. He stood firm, refusing to fall for the same trick again. He was no fool, after all. He was one of this generation's greatest prodigies. Niu's ultimate technique is unparalleled. No one can withstand it. Every ghost that sees it trembles. The super tyrant dragon claws. With a leap, Hu Niu's hands transformed into lethal claws, aiming straight for Yuan Chenghe's chest. This time, there would be no tricks. Yuan Cheng. He hesitated for a split second, then quickly raised his sword in a wide arc, his blade releasing an overwhelming burst of energy. More than 20 flashes of sword chi struck out in a dazzling spectacle, lighting up the skies above. Boom! The clash of forces erupted in a thunderous explosion, sending shockwaves that rattled the earth. A small mushroom cloud of dust rose into the air, and the shockwaves scattered the mist around, exposing the bare rocks beneath. If this had taken place in a forest, the trees would have been torn asunder. "Hit, hit, 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 hit!" Hu Niu's voice rang out, filled with excitement, as the dust settled. As the haze cleared, the sight revealed Hu Niu had already seized the upper hand, relentlessly pounding Yuan Chenghe. With each strike, she sent him crashing down time and again, landing powerful blows to his chest, arms, and face. Yuan Cheng, his once composed face was now a grotesque sight, swelling grotesquely like a pig's head. Purple and green bruises scattered across it, giving it a comical appearance. The onlookers gasped in disbelief. Hu Niu was far too fierce. Yuan Chenghe, one of the greatest prodigies, was being utterly defeated by this little girl. Bang! Another swift kick from Hu Niu sent Yuan Cheng, he flying, his body skidding to a halt right at Ling Han's feet. Ling Han crouched down, chuckling. "So, do you concede now?" "No." Yuan Chenghe spat, defiantly holding his head high. He would not concede, not to a little girl. "Well then, enjoy the next round." Ling Han kicked him once more. Yuan Chenghe, instinctively raising his arms to protect his swollen face, was sent flying by Ling Han's foot, But before he could regain himself, Hu Nu charged forward, and the battle began again. Bang! 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 After only a few more rounds, Yuan Chang'eng, he was kicked back again, landing at Ling Han's feet. Still not conceding? Ling Han asked, his amusement evident. Of course not. Yuan Chang'e remained as stubborn as ever. Then let's go again. Ling Han kicked him out once more. And Yuan Cheng. He was sent flying back and forth between him and Hu Nu. The crowd was stunned. Yuan Chenghe, the one said to rival the likes of Yao Hui Yue and the small saber king, was now being treated as a mere plaything, tossed back and forth without a chance to stand. After countless rounds, Yuan Chenghe was once again gliding toward Ling Han's feet. This time, Ling Han did not ask. He simply raised his foot, about to send Yuan Chenghe flying once again when, to his surprise, Yuan Chenghe finally shouted, "I concede! I concede!" Bang! He was kicked again. Sorry, I got used to kicking you back," Ling Han said with a laugh, clearly enjoying the situation. Yuan Chenghe muttered curses under his breath, but before he could respond, Hu Nu's fists descended once more. The barrage of punches had him sprawled at Ling Han's feet again. Ling Han finally stopped, smiling down at him. "Since you've conceded, now come show respect to your big brother." Yuan Cheng, he struggled to get up, his breath ragged, and muttered, "It was that little girl who defeated me. Unless you can show me the strength to make me submit, I would rather die than bend." "Not submitting?" Ling Han chuckled. "Don't act tough with me. Even if I were straight, I could make Li Feng Yu, that chatterbox, ramble at you and make you bend. I see now, you're the type who needs to be beaten into submission." "Fine then, I'll give you another round." "Heh." Hu Nu crossed her arms, watching with amusement. With a cold smile, Yuan Cheng, he muttered, "Only if you can defeat me will I acknowledge you as my boss." Ling Han considered it briefly before raising his left hand behind his back. "How about this? I'll fight you with one hand so no one can say I'm bullying you." "What arrogance!" Yuan Chenghe snorted. If Ling Han could truly defeat him with one hand, he would have no choice but to accept. He leveled his sword, and with a flourish announced, "Then come and face my 7 swords descend Mountain Yin." Boom! A wave of energy surged from his body, causing the very ground to tremble as dust formed a ring that rippled outward. This was a build-up for his most powerful strike, unmatched in force. Ling Han, however, did not rush to meet him. If he was to subdue this prodigy, it had to be in a way that would make him truly convinced. 7 swords, descend Yin Mountain. Yuan Cheng, he struck, shouting, "The first style, mountains exhaust and streams end." Rays of sword light cascaded from the blade, encircling the target, trapping it with an unstoppable force. One after another, the flashes of light filled the air. To be caught in these rays was to be doomed, trapped with no escape. With a single motion, Ling Han charged, arm raised like a sword, intent rippling from him like a sword that had never been seen before. How ignorant! Yuan Cheng, he sneered, seeing Ling Han's intent to block with his arm. Did he seek his own death? Translator, Redditor, Henye. Ding! Ling Han's arm struck the treasured sword head-on. The ripples of origin power could not be seen with the naked eye. Yet a shower of sparks exploded forth as if 2 divine blades of metal had collided in fierce combat. Yuan Cheng. He was instantly stunned beyond words. "You strange freak, you can actually resist a 7th-tier spirit tool head-on? How can your body be so hard?" he exclaimed in shock. "If I'm not a little formidable, how could I possibly be your boss?" Ling Han replied with a faint smile. "You really are full of yourself." Yuan Cheng, he snorted coldly. "I admit that your physical body is extremely hard, but that's all it is. To defeat me, that alone will never be enough." Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "You talk far too much nonsense. You ought to change that habit in the future. I prefer people who act more than they speak." "In your dreams." Yuan Cheng, he shouted loudly as he lifted his long sword high. 7 swords descend Mountain Yin, 2nd style, unleashing a horde of ghosts. Shoo, shoo, as fierce sword shadows slashed through the air. Countless sinister ghostly figures appeared from the void itself and rushed toward Ling Han like a tide of phantoms. "Oh, it even carries the effect of confusing one's divine sense?" Ling Han snorted softly. Using his arm like a longsword, he struck forward, unleashing brilliant sword light that seemed capable of conquering everything beneath heaven. He cultivated the diamond body technique, and his physique had already reached the toughness of rare metal 1 tier higher. In other words, his arm was no different from a treasured sword forged from 8th-tier rare metal, and his hand was a part of his body. The vein-like patterns naturally interwove through every inch of his flesh and blood, making it even more like a spirit tool than a true spirit tool itself. Wang, as the sword descended, its might shook heaven and earth. Peng Yuancheng. He was blasted away instantly, his entire body trembling violently. That was because Ling Han had used the thunderclap ninth heaven, leaving his entire body numb and powerless. Well, are you convinced now? Ling Han asked with a relaxed smile. Yuancheng, he was already half convinced. His opponent was absolutely an expert in sword techniques. That single sword ray was proof enough. Yet Ling Han had used his arm as a sword and still managed to shatter his ultimate move. This level of strength clearly stood above his own. However, he was still unwilling to admit defeat just like that. The years he had poured into relentless cultivation were not meant for him to bow and accept someone as his boss. I'm not convinced, Yuancheng. He declared stubbornly, straightening his neck as he raised his long sword once more. 7 swords descend Mountain Yin, third style, a Yin mountain locks ghosts. Ling Han burst into loud laughter. With a single flash, his body transformed into lightning, weaving effortlessly through the opponent's sword chi. In the blink of an eye, he appeared right in front of Yuancheng. He thrust the sword straight toward his face. Yuancheng He's face turned green with shock. Not only did Hu Niu know this move, Ling Han knew it as well. Ling Han clenched his right hand into a fist and smashed it toward Yuancheng He's face. The terrifying force surged forward like a raging torrent, instantly blasting Yuancheng He flying backward. Yuancheng He crashed heavily onto the ground, landing flat on his back. His physique was not particularly strong, and he had not been able to activate an Origin Power protective shield just now, causing him to groan miserably in pain. Well, convinced yet? Ling Han asked with a grin. No, not convinced? Yuancheng He replied while forcing himself upright. That's good. I was worried you'd admit defeat too early. I haven't even fought to my heart's content yet. Ling Han laughed loudly as he charged forward again, unleashing a flurry of ferocious attacks. Peng, 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 Yuancheng. He could no longer even swing his sword as Ling Han relentlessly beat him down. Everyone could not help but sigh inwardly for his misfortune. This fellow's luck was truly terrible. First, he had been trampled by Hu Niu, and now he was being trampled by Ling Han, completely without the slightest strength to fight back. It wasn't that Yuancheng He wasn't strong. On the contrary, he was extremely, extremely powerful. Among the younger generation, he could likely contend for a position within the top 10. However, Ling Han and Hu Niu were simply too strong, so strong that they had already surpassed the limits of their generation. To suppress Ling Han and Hu Niu, one would have to be half a generation to a full generation older than them. For instance, geniuses above 30 years old, such as Small Saber King or Lang Yatian. Otherwise, within the same age bracket, there was probably no one capable of rivaling Ling Han. Much less Hu Niu. Most people had not even awakened their spirit bases at the age of 7 or 8, so how could they possibly fight against her? I admit defeat. After being beaten so miserably, Yuancheng He finally could not endure it any longer and admitted defeat. This was also because of the earlier agreement. Otherwise, he would rather die than yield. Ling Han smiled faintly. He casually tossed out several bottles of medicinal pills and said, "The red bottle heals injuries, the blue bottle instantly restores origin power, and the purple bottle assists cultivation, increasing your conversion of spirit chi by a full fold." Not only Yuancheng He, even the others were so shocked they nearly jumped out of their skin. Healing injuries and restoring origin power were nothing special, but increasing conversion of spirit chi by a fold was truly astonishing. For ordinary cultivators, whether accumulating origin power or comprehending martial arts, both were slow processes, and both had to be cultivated simultaneously. For geniuses, however, martial arts comprehension came somewhat easier, so the greater limitation was the accumulation of origin power. In short, this was equivalent to doubling one's cultivation speed, an incomparably precious treasure. Yuancheng. He was deeply moved. He had only acknowledged Ling Han as boss outwardly while rejecting it inwardly. But now that resistance in his heart was beginning to melt away. Having such a boss didn't seem so bad, wealthy and generous. Ling Han smiled calmly. Subduing a person required nothing more than the use of both kindness and might. After displaying might earlier, now it was time for kindness. He refused to believe this would fail to win the man over. "Thank you, boss, Yuan Cheng," he said quietly, his face slightly red. He had never called anyone boss before in his life. "In the future, call me young Master Han," Ling Han said. "Forget about this boss nonsense. We're not gangsters. That would make us look cheap." "Yes, young Master Han." Yuan Cheng, he corrected himself smoothly, because Hu Niu was staring at him with murderous eyes. It was obvious that if he answered incorrectly, the little girl would make his life miserable. "All right, you may go. I'll summon you if there's anything." Ling Han waved his hand casually. Yuan Cheng. He was overjoyed. He had originally thought Ling Han would command him to run errands everywhere, such as plundering rare stones or similar tasks. Acknowledging this boss wasn't a loss at all. Look, although he had taken a beating, he had also received so many precious medicinal pills. Their value was definitely greater than the beating he suffered. Afraid Ling Han might change his mind, he hurriedly turned around and left. Young Master Han, you can also take me as your subordinate. Bestow some medicinal pills upon me as well," Li Fengyu said with puffed cheeks. "How about you become my sister's husband?" "Brother?" Li Zixian said through clenched teeth. Why did this brother of hers always want to sell her off? Ling Han pondered briefly before saying, "All right, I'll take you as an underling." Although Big Mouth Li's strength wasn't remarkable, the trait of having such a big mouth actually had useful applications. In the future, if Ling Han wanted to recruit geniuses from all over, someone like this to spread the word would be indispensable. "All right, brother-in-law," Li Fengyu said fawningly. Even Ling Han was left speechless. He said, "Aren't you afraid someone will really seal your mouth shut one day?" "Hey, young Master Han! Young Master Han!" Li Fengyu immediately corrected himself and no longer dared to speak nonsense. Not only had Ling Han revealed a displeased expression, but Hu Niu and Zhu Xuan Error were glaring at him furiously as well. Offending 3 people at once would definitely bring disaster upon him. "Let's continue." "What?" Ling Han had just been about to tell everyone to continue forward when suddenly the ground beneath their feet shook violently. The earth groaned, and an extremely terrifying crack spread across the ground from afar at astonishing speed. Shoo, shoo, shoo. Everyone hurriedly rose into the air. The mist rapidly dispersed as spiderweb-like fissures spread across the entire mountain valley. "An earthquake?" Everyone cried out in alarm. Ling Han gazed toward the distance with a shocked expression and said, "It's not an earthquake. A big fellow is about to come out."